Ma'am, with all due respect, this is a restricted area. The observation lounge is down the hall. This is a multi-billion-dollar flight simulator, not a family tour. The words, slick with condescension, came from Captain Price, an instructor whose confidence far outstripped his rank. The handful of young pilots in the control room chuckled, a nervous, sycophantic sound that filled the sterile space. They glanced at the woman standing silently near the back wall, then quickly away, as if her civilian clothes might be contagious. She was unremarkable, dressed in simple slacks and a plain blouse, her hair tied back without ceremony. She offered no retort, no flash of anger, no defensive justification. Her gaze remained fixed on the young lieutenant strapped into the simulator's cockpit, her younger brother, Evan. Her stillness was absolute, a pocket of calm in a room buzzing with youthful ego and the low hum of powerful machinery. But the base command sergeant major, observing from the shadows of the doorway, saw something else. He didn't see a lost sister or a curious civilian. He saw the stance. He saw the way her eyes tracked the pre-flight diagnostics not as a layman would, with detached curiosity, but with a sharp, analytical precision, her head making microscopic tilts, absorbing data at a rate he hadn't seen since his time in special projects. He saw a professional at rest. If you believe true strength needs no announcement, type silence in the comments below. Captain Price preened under the attention of his students, mistaking the woman's silence for submission. He was a man who believed the world operated on volume, that authority was a function of decibels and swagger. Lieutenant Riley, he boomed into the comms. Looks like your sister is here for moral support. Try not to disappoint. Evan, a gifted pilot but still green, flushed with a mixture of pride and embarrassment. He wanted to defend his sister, to say something, but he knew the rigid hierarchy of the training wing. He gave a tight, "Yes, sir," his focus narrowing on the glowing screens before him. The woman, Eleanor, simply gave her brother a slow, deliberate nod. It was a gesture of immense subtlety, a transfer of quiet confidence that went unnoticed by everyone except Evan, who felt its effect like a steadying hand on his shoulder. To the others, her passivity was a confirmation of their assumptions. She was an outsider, a soft civilian in a hard world, a footnote in her brother's story. The air was thick with unspoken judgment, with the smug certainty of young men who believed they understood the universe of competence and that she existed well outside its borders. Her silence was their evidence, her calm demeanor their proof. They did not understand that some people have no need to raise their voice when their very presence carries the weight of a library of unread, classified volumes. The simulation began flawlessly. The virtual F-35 lifted from the runway into a perfectly rendered sky, a testament to Evan's natural talent. Captain Price offered a running commentary of condescending praise, his voice a smug drone in the control room. Then it happened. A single, piercing alarm, followed by a cascade of others. On the main screen, the sky began to spin violently. Multiple engine failure. We have a flameout. Evan's voice was tight with panic. Hydraulics are gone. I have no control. The warnings flashed in angry red text across the monitors. Total system failure. Catastrophic power loss. This was no standard training scenario. It was a ghost in the machine, a glitch that had thrown the simulation into an unwinnable nightmare state. Price barked orders, his voice suddenly stripped of its earlier confidence. Go to manual reboot. Auxiliary power. Now, Riley, now. But his commands were useless, textbook answers for a problem that had torn the textbook to shreds. The pilots in the control room were frozen, their earlier amusement replaced by a shared, vicarious terror. The calm had been shattered, the professional environment exposed as a fragile facade, and in its place, a raw and escalating panic began to take hold, threatening to consume them all. The multi-billion-dollar machine was now a digital coffin, plummeting towards the unfeeling earth. In that vortex of chaos, Eleanor moved. There was no haste in her step, no alarm on her face. She moved with a liquid efficiency, a purpose so profound it seemed to bend the frantic energy of the room around her. She placed a hand lightly on the shoulder of the terrified technician at the master console, who flinched and then looked up at her, wide-eyed. Her voice, when it came, was the first sound she had made. It was not loud, but but it cut through the noise like a surgeon's scalpel. "Stand up," she said. It was not a request. The technician vacated the seat without a thought. Her fingers, long and steady, descended upon the keyboard. They did not type. They flew, a blur of practiced, rhythmic motion. She ignored the primary flight controls, the things every pilot knew. Instead, she was diving deep into the system's core architecture, navigating back-end command prompts and diagnostic subroutines that Price didn't even know existed. "Evan," she said into the comms, her voice an anchor of absolute calm. "Hands off the stick." Now he obeyed instantly, his training and instinct screaming at him to fight for control, but some deeper, older instinct told him to trust her completely. With a final series of keystrokes, she bypassed the entire corrupted flight model, isolating the core avionics and forcing a hard reboot of the hydraulic actuators through a tertiary power bus. On the screen, the plummeting jet stabilized. It was flying again. Impossible. The door to the control room hissed open, a sound lost in the residual tension of the crisis. Command Sergeant Major Thorne stepped fully into the room, his face a mask of controlled urgency. He had been on his way to his office when the system-wide failure alert lit up his tablet. His eyes swept the scene. The pale, sweating faces of the student pilots, the stunned silent Captain Price, and the impossible image of the F-35 simulator gliding towards a dead stick landing on the main screen. And then he saw her. She was standing by the master console, one hand resting on the keyboard, her expression as placid as a still lake. Thorne, a man who had served for 30 years, from the deserts of Iraq to the mountains of Afghanistan, a man who had briefed 4-star generals and met 2 presidents, stopped dead. His posture, already ramrod straight, seemed to achieve a new dimension of rigidity. The air in his lungs froze. He wasn't looking at a civilian woman. He was looking at a living legend, a figure spoken of in hushed, reverent tones in the highest echelons of the Pentagon. A person whose security clearance was so high it was practically theoretical. He recognized her from a single, grainy photograph in a top-secret briefing on next-generation aerospace threats he'd attended 5 years prior. He felt a chill of profound, unadulterated respect run down his spine. Every eye in the room swiveled to the command sergeant major, expecting him to restore order, to demand an explanation for the civilian at the controls. Instead, they witnessed something that defied their entire understanding of the military world. Thorne's feet came together with an audible crack. His right hand snapped up to his brow in a salute so crisp, so fiercely perfect, it was a work of art. It was a gesture of ultimate deference, a soldier's highest tribute. Major General Riley. His voice boomed, raw with an authority that dwarfed Price's hollow bluster. "My apologies for the lax security, ma'am. I was not aware you were on base." The title detonated in the silence. "Major General." The room seemed to tilt on its axis. Captain Price's jaw hung open, his face a canvas of disbelief and dawning horror. "Evan's sister? A general? A 2-star? Thorne, never breaking his salute, nodded to a nearby terminal. "Technician, pull up service record for Riley. Eleanor J. Alpha level clearance." The stunned airman complied, his fingers trembling. The file appeared, and a litany of impossible achievements scrolled across the screen. Unit, Air Force Research Laboratory, Commander. Medals, Distinguished Service Medal, Legion of Merit, Distinguished Flying Cross with Valor. Flight hours, 6,000 plus, including over 2,000 in experimental and classified airframes. Status, active duty. The room was no longer silent with shock. It was silent with awe. The story did not walk out of the simulator complex. It detonated. It spread through the base like a shock wave, passed in hushed whispers between maintenance crews on the flight line, typed in frantic all-caps messages between pilots in different squadrons, and recounted with wide-eyed wonder over lukewarm coffee in the mess hall. The narrative took on the quality of a myth. They said she hadn't just landed the simulator. She had reprogrammed it mid-flight. They said she had written the recovery protocols that the system itself had failed to execute. They whispered her call sign, Ghost, a name earned because she was the chief test pilot for the nation's most secret aerial platforms, a wraith who lived in the stratosphere of classified development. Captain Price became a ghost of a different sort. He was not officially reprimanded. The public humiliation was deemed punishment enough. He confined himself to his quarters for 3 days, emerging as a quieter, visibly diminished man. The arrogance had been scoured from him, leaving behind a hollowed-out shell of his former self. His assumptions had been so total, his condescension so complete, that their obliteration had taken a part of his identity with it. He had judged a book by its cover and discovered the book was the author of the entire library. A week later, the man who was once Captain Price approached Lieutenant Evan Riley after a debrief. His voice was low, his eyes fixed on the floor. He no longer commanded a room. He barely occupied the space he stood in. "Lieutenant," he began, the word tasting like ash in his mouth. I need you to do something for me. I need you to convey my most profound and unconditional apology to your sister." To General Riley, he finally looked up, and for the first time, Evan saw not an arrogant instructor, but a humbled man. "What I did was a failure of the highest order. A failure of leadership, of professionalism, and of basic human decency. I made an assumption based on nothing, and I will carry the weight of that lesson for the rest of my career." Evan simply nodded, understanding that the apology was not just for him to pass on. It was a confession Price needed to make to begin his own recovery. The general was already gone, recalled to a world of challenges far beyond a training simulator. But her impact remained, etched into the very culture of the base. The simulator, Sim 7, was never called that again. To every pilot who trained there, it was known only as the General's Chair, a permanent monument to the day that arrogance collided with quiet, absolute competence. Months hardened into a year. Major Price, as he was now known, stood before a new class of aspiring pilots. He was a different man, a different instructor. His lessons were still rigorous, but they were now layered with a wisdom born from his own spectacular failure. He began every single introductory course not with a lecture on aerodynamics or combat tactics, but with a story. "Let me tell you why we check our assumptions at the door," he would say, his voice even and steady. "Let me tell you about the General's Chair." He told the story without varnish, casting himself as the fool and the quiet woman as the embodiment of a professionalism they should all aspire to. The legend of Eleanor Riley became a foundational piece of the Wing's identity, a cautionary tale that taught a lesson more valuable than any flight maneuver. That competence is not announced, it is demonstrated. That respect is not owed to a uniform, but to the character and skill of the person wearing it, or not wearing it. The culture began to shift. Young pilots listened more and spoke less. They began to look for the quietest person in the room, wondering what unseen expertise they might hold. The legacy of her brief, silent visit was not a memory of a single event, but the creation of a new, more thoughtful standard. True authority is not claimed, it is recognized. It is the quiet gravity that pulls respect into its orbit without a single word of demand. Eleanor Riley never sought applause or validation. Her life was a testament to the fact that what you are speaks so loudly that no one can hear what you say you are. Her competence was not a shield she wore, but the very air she breathed, an undeniable force of nature that reordered the world around it through simple, precise action. The echoes of that day in the simulator did not fade. They became part of the institution's soul, a permanent reminder that the most dangerous assumptions are the ones we make about other people. Her legacy was not a name on a building or a picture on a wall. It was the instilled habit of looking past the surface, of seeking substance over style, and of understanding that the greatest strength is often found in the deepest silence. It was a lesson in humility, learned at the feet of a master who never even intended to teach. For more stories where quiet competence triumphs over loud assumption and where silent professionalism defines their worth, subscribe to Unknown Heroine Stories.